Good morning, Sean here from Mountains Garage, here to continue our video series on assembling a Turbo 400 with a trans brake. And today we're going to play the drums, the direct drum and the forward drum. The direct drum, like its name, is high gear, direct. The forward clutch drum is on in every gear except park, neutral, and reverse. So if you're going forward, it's applied. It doesn't have to release. It's not a shifting clutch. It's just on. And that's going to come into play when we do one modification to it on assembly. Let's start with the direct clutch drum and the sprag that rolls on the back. This is the most popular one you're going to find. You can see the little ski slopes, or whatever you want to call them. It's very popular. It's middle of the road as far as strength goes. You're going to find a ton of these. I've used them. Quite a bit of power. Eventually it may roll over. When it rolls over, it stops. It's supposed to freewheel to the right and lock to the left. When that happens, if it rolls over, you'll know it. It won't necessarily do any damage. It's just most people opt for the stronger 34 element sprag, which comes on drums that are round. These are rare, but they're still out there. This one, they come stock nowadays. They used to have a 34 element from the factory in the 60s, but now they got this 16 element. This is actually the weakest sprag. I've gone over this before. But the 34 element that you buy, it just comes with just the centerpiece here, this piece. It literally just slips right back on there, and you can reassemble it with the plate. And this is a stock snap ring. I use a spiral lock because this has, I guess, a tendency, given enough stress, to pop off because it takes very little effort to put it on. So the spiral lock is much more solid. So if you can find a round drum, you can install the 34 element sprag, or you can buy one. If you're going to buy a drum, probably worth the money to go aluminum, but that option's up to you. Now let's talk about pistons. This is again that very average drum with the popular sprag. That's a steel piston, and they use this spacer plate when they decide how many clutches they're going to put in. This probably had a wave steel to absorb shock, and then 3 or 4. It's a pretty thick spacer. So it had 3 or 4 clutches tops. The good thing about the steel piston is you can just change the spacer to add more clutches. The pistons are all the same. They make an aluminum ring to apply, and these aren't the end of the world if that's what you got, because it's about $100 to buy an aluminum piston for a direct and a forward. Some have check balls, some don't when you're shopping. The safe bet is to buy the one with the check ball, and you could use it in either one. If you buy one without, your drum has to have a check ball. You can have 2 check balls, but you can't have no check balls. You know what I'm saying? So now, this is out of a 475. It's a 6 clutcher steel piston, but look at how thin that ring is compared to that fat one. That's all they do is swap that ring. So again, this is the most popular thing you're gonna find. This is a beautiful drum. Motorhomes typically don't have a lot of miles on them. So I'm going to save this. Also has a round back so I can put the 34 element sprag on. This is a nice find. This was out of an 80s transmission, so they're still out there. And finally, this is a direct clutch that I'm going to actually install in this transmission. It is round back. I already installed the 34 element sprag with a spiral lock. This has an aluminum piston. Now with an aluminum piston, this area would have to be machined down if you want to add more clutches or run thinner steels and clutches. This is a 5 clutch Borg Warner with grooves cut in it. I want to try them, so I'm going to run this as 5 clutch. I don't expect any trouble. You also have to have, per the instructions, a 60 thousandths bleed hole, or 1/16 drill will do the job. That's for centrifugal oil potentially building up behind the piston. More theory, right? Well, let's talk about more theory. All this talk about, sorry I keep grabbing that. I want to get my hand dirty, get my camera greasy. All this talk about dual feeding the direct clutch. To properly discuss dual feeding, I need to show you a piston, so let's take one out. This is my spring compressor. It was like $100 on eBay. I just got it mounted in a vise. Works great. Adjustable height. You can slide that up and down. Let's pop a piston out and we'll talk about it. Alright, so I used my compressor. Pushed it down. Pop snap ring out. Plate. These are the springs that we're going to replace. They came in the trans brake kit. Chuck these. I saved the stock ones. Got quite a collection. Not sure why. And then now this just pulls out. You have a seal on the outer. You have a middle seal and a seal on the inner. So the piston has two. This is the one in the drum. This is the one that we're going to leave out. This original job of this seal was to separate two halves of the piston. You had this half and this half, one for reverse, one for direct. You take the seal out, you're dual feeding it. This piston is going to fill up all together. That's the whole thing. You're double your clamping force. And you leave the second seal back on the center support like we talked about 50 times. This is a seal we leave out of the direct drum. And then we reassemble with whatever piston you want. Drilling the bleed hole that's required 1/16 or 65,000, somewhere around there. The trans brake requires it. Usually that's my check ball. I usually go across from it, right in that corner. I don't want to hit this wall, so it's on this surface, but almost to that, kind of at an angle, and it'll shoot right out the back like it's supposed to. Warning, buy a package of 1/16 drill bits because it's really easy to break them. I usually break them just as I bust through the other side and I end up pulling the drill out the other side, but I need to buy more drills. Mental note. Almost ready to install in the transmission. Seems like a good time to talk about the option of the 4L80E drum. You can see I've already inspected the bore and I've also lubed it. Where it's going to go over the center support seals. The intermediate clutches ride on these grooves right here. A 4L80E drum, they say this is longer. I haven't measured it. A little wider, longer, depending on where you're standing. To engage the 4 clutches that come in a 4L80. I simulated the power pack that you can buy, and I use thinner steels and clutches, so I should still be on the window. I have no worries there. But if you buy a 4L80E drum, they come with a 34 element sprag, or can be updated to it because they're round back. That's cool. But they have a one-piece return spring. And with the trans brake upgrade, where we had to replace the stock springs with those giant monster springs, that's not going to work. So if you buy a 4L80E drum, be aware that you need to buy an aluminum piston or a piston and the retaining ring for the springs. No big deal. Alright, it's all installed. All you do is I grab right here and wiggle it in. You know it's in when you get this sound. If you don't have that sound, if it's dull, you're still hung up on the clutch. If it wasn't for the K-saver, I could put my finger down there and you can tell this could not go down anymore. Clutch stack. I'm going to go ahead and put my clutches in, but when you're playing around with stack up on the bench, and I'll show you again on the forward clutch, if you get about 40 to 60 thousandths below this shelf where the pressure plate's going to sit, you know it's right. You don't need to put the pressure plate and snap ring on every time. I do it the last thing just to double check habit. But, I mean, that's your gap shows right there, your clearance. So I'm going to go ahead and set my clutches in, and then we'll work on the forward clutch. Alright, this is my forward clutch, all taken apart, ready for assembly. I forgot I bought a hub that takes a bearing instead of a thrust washer. That's cool. The hub is extra strong. I'm still using a stock input shaft. I have it, I'm going to use that. I don't know if I talked about soaking clutches, but I just put them in, flip them over, and they're good to go. Some people tell you they have to soak for a certain amount of time. I think they're going to spend the rest of their lives soaking up oil. It'll be fine. I use a full complement of return springs. If you have stronger ones, you could use them. This is going to be a 5 clutch. No wave plate. A stock forward clutch has a wave plate to help cushion the application. When you put it in drive, they don't want it to slam. My cushion is going to be a loose torque converter. For the same reason, I'm talking about a modification. This is the same piston in a direct drum. We omitted the seal so we could use the whole piston for different reasons. They used to separate direct and reverse. In this case, they only separated the halves to help slow the apply. We're going to leave that center seal off, the one that goes here. So when I go for a forward gear, I get all the piston instantly. I don't need cushion. I'm not looking for comfort. I'm looking for strength. Time to reinstall the piston. I'm going to attempt to do this while holding the camera. I showed you the other day different lip seal tools. In this case, once again, I bought the correct Kentmore J tools. I call them J tools because all the part numbers start with J. If you ever look in like the Chevy service manual, Kentmore made all the tools for them. They all start with J. So these are J tools. They make a lot of J tools. Again, I'm going to try to do it one-handed. I've lubed everything. There's the word lube again. It's hard to do this looking through the camera. But it's that easy. These take all the work out of it. They're pretty slick. When you reinstall the piston, the snap ring needs to go between the, see those 4 bumps that retain the ring? The opening of the snap ring needs to go between those. And when you let this back up, that actually locks that ring in there. Pretty ingenious. You got to remember this transmission was started being manufactured in 1964. It was 10 more years before we get rid of points and come up with electronic ignition. But this thing is so far ahead. Kind of like airplanes. When you think of what we were doing with airplanes compared to cars, makes you think. Again, on the stack up, I'm just below that shelf. If I was setting this up originally, I'd go ahead and put the pressure plate and the snap ring on without the hub, so I can get in there with my screwdriver and jack it up and down, feel the gauge it, whatever I'm going to do. Because once the hub's in there and the pressure plate's back on, you can't see the clutches really. So I'm going to assemble it and we'll go jiggle it into the transmission. Alright, I successfully jiggled this one into the transmission. This one likes to, I call it this one, the forward clutch likes to hang up on the last clutch. It makes you think it's in all the way, but in this case you can put your hand down and feel between the direct and forward, and there's no room between them. And most importantly, you got to have that clunk. If it's dull, she's not all the way in. If you actually put a flat bar across there and measure down to it, it's about 1 3/8. But the clunk will tell you. You can put your hand down the side. There's no excuse to destroy the transmission when you put the pump in by not having this in all the way. You got 3 telltale signs. All right, that's going to wrap up this video. I'm going to go eat breakfast, post this one, and I guess I'll work on the pump after that. It'll be a separate video. Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.